Okay, today we're going to go over some basics for using the Android Studio Editor and navigating around our code in it. So I have Android Studio open here. The app that we're going to be using as the example here is an app called Canary. So let me show you this application. It has some tabs up here on the top. When you click the floating action button, you receive a form that allows you to log some information about your mood. So let's say I'm relatively happy, and I recently did exercise and some meditation and some journaling. And uh, let's say I don't have any notes. I record that. So then I can go to the history tab and I can see the history of all of the moods that I have logged. And I can also make a new mood from this screen. And then I can pull to refresh and I see my new mood come up. So that's the application that we're going to be looking at. So I'm here in my Android Studio Editor. Let's talk first about some of the menus that you can use and how to get around all of these toolbars that appear all around the code. So the way that you navigate those toolbars is generally with Command plus numbers. So when I hit Command 1, that's going to pull up my project menu right here. And if I have it hidden, then it'll toggle it between being hidden and being shown, as you can see. I use that project navigator to go around and look at the different files that I have. So that's command 1. Command 2 is going to be my favorites menu. I don't typically use this one that much. Command 3 then is going to be your finder. So you can find specific files or you can find specific uses of a file this way. So you can run, you get your your run uh, menu for the app with command 4. We're going to talk more about run and debug later, but you see that over here. And essentially what that is you could see this little tab right here that says app. That indicates the running instance of the app that I have up on the emulator right here. And I can use buttons right here to rerun the application. That's what this green arrow is. Stop the application. That's what this red square is. Or do a number of things with the logs from the running version of the application. Okay, so command 5 is debug. And so this is if you're running the app in debug mode. We're going to talk more about debug mode later when we talk about debugging and setting breakpoints. But you have similar things here. You have this green arrow that allows you to rerun the app in debug mode, stop the app in debug mode. Cool. Okay. So command 6 is logcat. This is your logs. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later in the video as well. Command 7 is your project structure. You can see that over here on the left. I have my structure, so I'm in the class called the mood entry fragment right now, and I can see all of the methods there in the mood entry fragment. Okay, so command 8 is your Gradle menu, which is this menu on the upper right. And that's going to show you your build commands. It's also going to show you the output if you run build commands with Gradle on your Android app. So command 9 is my favorite one because this one is version control. We're also going to be looking at this a little bit later. Good. So those are all of our menus that we have access to in the application. And now we're going to talk about some different levels of logging. So in Android, there are a number of different ways that we can print information into logcat when our app is running. The most common one is to use log.d, which is a logging command for debugging. But there are a bunch, and so I'm going to show you a few now. I want to show you the one that I've used the most in this application, log.i. So there are different levels of verbosity for the different types of logs that you might want in an Android application. They go from the most verbose down to the least verbose. So let's go through them. There's log-v, which means verbose. And that's what you would use if for some reason you wanted to log every little thing in your application. you might do log.v here for all of those little things that somebody might want to filter out, but that if somebody's really looking for all the information, then they can go and look at the verbose logs. So the next is log.d, which stands for debug. They all take the same two arguments, which is a tag, which is a string, and a message, which is also a string. After that, you have log.I, which is info. That's the one that you see me using the most in this application. It's things that I wanted to log where something hadn't necessarily gone wrong, but it was a waypoint that people might want to know that we got there. Then there's log.w. This is for warning. So you might use this one in a situation where you're catching an exception and you know it's there and you know that you're going to catch it, but you just want to log that you got into the catch block of that exception anyway, just because something might have potentially gone wrong and so somebody might need to find that information. Finally, there's log.e, which is error. And this is what you might use in any case where you're throwing an exception. So once you have those logs, you can go into Logcat. So I'm going to hit Command 6 for Logcat. My app is running. And you can see that there's some drop downs here that I can use. So I have my drop down on the left for which emulator I'm running or which device I'm running my app on. And then I can choose which app on that device I want to look at. So I'm currently looking at Canary. And here I can choose my log level. And you'll notice that these log levels are the same as the ones that we just discussed. And so if I want to see verbose, I'm going to get absolutely everything. So currently I have a number of log.I for info in this application. And so if I go all the way down to info, I'm going to keep getting those logs. If I want to filter out some of those logs, I really only want to see where things are going wrong maybe, then I can set it to warn or I can set it to error. And I'm only going to get the logs of that level plus anything more serious than that level. So at verbose, I get everything. At debug, I get everything but verbose. At info, I get everything but verbose and debug, and so on and so forth. So now you can see that I'm at warn. I'm not getting all my info ones anymore because warn only covers itself, warn, and more serious stuff, error. You also can use assert, and this is typically what you would use if you want to check that something is the case before moving on in an application. And you could log that with assert, and that would be log.a. Okay, so now we've looked a little bit at logging and how you can filter in the logs in your application. This gives you the opportunity to really do as much logging as you want and know that you have the ability to filter that out if you don't want to see it. And so you don't have to be concerned with being too noisy in the logs. So that's Logcat. Now let's talk about how to set a breakpoint and how to use breakpoints. So in an Android application, you can set breakpoints that the code will stop at. So let's look for an example here. I am in my history fragment. Let's switch to the mood entry fragment. And I'm going to put a breakpoint in on resume somewhere. So now when I open my mood entry fragment and on resume is called, that breakpoint is going to get hit. So I can do that in a couple of ways. Whoops. I can click right here on the line number, and that's going to give me this little red thing right here. And that means that I have made a breakpoint right there on that line. Then I can use Command F8 to toggle that. So I can put my cursor on a line, let's say notes edit text, and hit Command F8, and that's going to add my breakpoint for me. Now, if I run the app in debug mode with Control Option D, and I click on App, when it hits my breakpoint, it's going to pause. So we'll see that app come up in a second, and we'll be able to navigate to our mood entry fragment, and we'll see that we hit our breakpoint. So you saw the dialog that said it was waiting for the debugger. Now we're ready to go. I click this. Boom, it hits my breakpoint. So now I can see that I'm at the breakpoint right here in the code window. and I can come down to my debug menu, and I could see some stuff here. I can see what method was called, where I'm at in the run. I can see information about the class that I'm in, which is the mood entry fragment. I can see information about the stuff that's going on inside of there. I have a checkbox list on this screen, and so I see those objects here, which I can inspect. I can also use these buttons right here to step over this point in the code or to step into or out of like a conditional block, like so. And I can also use these buttons on the side to resume the program if I want to keep going. And so now here I am, and I've moved past my breakpoint. So let me pull that back down. So with Command Shift F8, you can look at all of the breakpoints that you currently have set on your application. So if I were to go to the history fragment and let's say I want to put one, I don't know, right there, want one there, up here, cool. And then I want to go to the trends fragment and I want to stick one, I don't know, there. So then when I hit Command Shift F8, or rather, let me get off this line. Command Shift F8. Then I can manage all of my breakpoints from this little dialog right here. And so I could check them and uncheck them to turn them on and off. And I can also say universally, if I'm running in debug mode, I want to stop if I hit a Java exception, or I want to stop if I hit any exception. So this is useful if I want to get sort of a larger view of what all is happening in my application, if I want to slow things down or pause at certain points. So I can hit escape to get out of that, or I can click done. Now, you see that because I deactivated that breakpoint, the circle is empty. And when I hit Command F8, it takes it away. It doesn't fill it in. So Command F8 will give you an active breakpoint, or it'll take away the breakpoint. It won't give you an inactive breakpoint. Now, another thing you might have seen is that when I was on a line with a breakpoint, when I hit Command Shift F8, I get this little set of checkboxes for this breakpoint specifically, where I can enable or suspend my breakpoint so I can activate or inactivate it. And I can also put a condition in place. So I can say, like, if, so in this case, the breakpoint would run, or we move past the breakpoint if the condition isn't met. I'm going to click done on that. I'm going to get rid of this breakpoint. Cool. So those are breakpoints in Android Studio. Let's look at the next thing. How to find text. So we know that we can use Command Shift O to find a specific file in Android Studio. You can also use Command Shift F to find specific text in Android Studio. So if I wanted to look specifically for places where I am making a call to something called a database, then I can see that in here. I can navigate up and down with my up and down arrows. And I see this little window at the bottom that shows me a preview of where it's finding that code. I can hit enter to go to that actual code in my code window. And that's where I can edit it and do things with it. So that's how you find code. I use that feature pretty often. And I use it to find, so for example, if I wanted to find all of the places where I'm finding a view by specific ID, I can put in find view by ID, and I see all of those in here. I can also universally replace things in my application with Command Shift R. Now, if I wanted to replace find view by ID everywhere with something else, I could. But you want to be really careful about using this because it is really easy to accidentally change text that you don't want to change because there's like one exception where you don't want to change it or something. So you can replace them one by one with this little blue button in the lower right hand corner, or you can replace all with the white button, which I don't really recommend doing, but you have it. I'm going to hit escape to get out of that. Great, so that's how you find text. Now, let's be a little bit more specific with how we're trying to look for information in our application. So let me close out of everything, and I'm going to do that with Command-Shift-W. That closes all my code windows except for the specific file that I'm looking at right now. I'm in the mood entry fragment, and I'm interested in following some stuff that's happening in here. So in my mood entry fragment, let's say I'm making a call here to mood entry. So I'm making a new instance of this thing called mood entry, and I want to see the constructor for mood entry. So I can do that by putting my cursor on the constructor right here and hitting Command B. That takes me to the constructor for the mood entry class, which we can see right here in the header of the Kotlin file. Now suppose I wanted to go the other direction. Suppose I had a method and I wanted to see all the places where it is used. So Option F7 is going to get you usages. Now down in the bottom of Android Studio here, this has brought up my Find menu, and I can now navigate through everywhere where this is being used. So it shows me in my mood entry adapter class in a method called onBindViewHolder, it sees me using mood entry for something. It sees me using it again here. So let's look at another example of that. Let's go to the, in fact, let's go to the mood entry adapter. So I'm going to go into this mood entry adapter. So the mood entry adapter has some methods too. We've got this method select image for. I want to know where that's being used, so I put my cursor on select image for. I hit Option F7, and now I see in my Find menu at the bottom that I'm using that method right here on line 47. So it's Command B to go to the declaration, Option F7 to go to the usages. All right, finally, let's take a look at the version control menu. Like I mentioned, my favorite one. So there are a few things that I like about my version control menu. The first one is that in this tab called Local Changes, I can see any changes that I have made to my application that I have not committed yet. And so we see that I have a few right here. And if I hit Command D, I can go in and I can see what those changes are. So in this case, I changed log.i to log.e. I can click on this little arrow in between the two files to revert it to the old thing. And then if I want to move on to the next file that I've changed, I can do that with Command Shift closing bracket. This is going to take me to the next file that I've changed. And now I can see that I have replaced a layout here with a method. Cool. All right, so let's say I want to go to the next file. I hit Command Shift end bracket and nothing's happening. That means that I've looked at all the files and I've reached the end of the list. Okay, so I'm going to hit Escape to get out of that. There is one more thing that I really like about the version control menu, which is that next to local changes, there's a tab called Log. And if I click on Log, I can see my entire version history here. So I see that I have all of these commits, and they're on this branch called data persistence. I can see that my local data persistence is 2 commits ahead of origin/data persistence, so I need to push. I can also see that I have a branch called mood entry form a few commits back, and another branch called base activity with tabs. Excellent. So I can go up and down between these commits, and what you'll notice on the right is that there's this file menu thing. What this does is it shows me all of the files that changed in that commit. So I can look at my tweaks commit right here. I can see the commit message down here, as well as my SHA, who made the commit and when it was made. And I can see my files. Just like with local changes, here I can hit Command D and I can see what my changes to the files were. So in this case, it looks like I added a bottom constraint and I decided that I wanted the bottom of my view to be 20 DP's device pixels below this text view. Great. So let's look at another one which changed some more files maybe. So I'm going to navigate down to hmm, let's look at small stylistic changes. So I can look at the entire commit message right here. What were my stylistic changes? I made the floating action button yellow. I changed the get help tab to a profile tab. And I wrapped the text in the history cells so that the pastimes weren't getting cut off. That's all good to know. Now I can come in here and I can look at what exactly changed. So it looks like I added a color to my button there. And now I'm using Command Shift End bracket again to go forward. I can use Command Shift beginning bracket to go back. And in this way, I can look at all of the changes that were associated with a specific commit in Android Studio. I think that's enough commands for now, but those will help you to navigate around Android Studio and to explore code that you're new to or code where you want to figure out how to add something when you're in the editor. I should also mention that most of these key bindings work pretty much the same on all JetBrains editors. There will be small differences in between the JetBrains editors, but the vast majority of your key bindings on Android Studio are going to work in IntelliJ, RubyMine, PyCharm, WebStorm, or any of the JetBrains editors.